it's Shelby here. Welcome back to A Little Literary Love. I'm glad you all are with me today. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite high steam authors. So if you're looking for some authors to read, some books, and you really want a lot of steam in your stories, I've got you covered today with today's list of authors. Now, before we get into these people, I do just want to say real quick, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so if you like my content. I really appreciate it. But yeah, so let's get right into it. If you are a fan of my videos, a lot of these authors will have popped up in prior videos, prior recommendation videos, because these are some of my like all-time favorite authors. I'm a really big fan of steam in my stories, but I tend to prefer like steam that also has good plot and other like storyline things involved in it. So the first author that I have to mention is going to be Sierra Simone. Sierra Simone is one of my all-time favorite authors, mostly because she brings a ton of steam to her stories. Like, these definitely will make you blush when you read her books, but then she also packs a lot of emotion into her stories as well. So Priest is a great example of this. It's very taboo, so I know this isn't going to be for everybody, but like I said, the steam on this is very, very high. This one is about a priest who falls in love with one of his parishioners, and they do end up having some steamy scenes in the church. So like I said, I know this isn't going to be for everybody, but I loved it. But I also loved the emotional punch that this brought, just because of our priest hero. He is struggling with his feelings towards this woman, that he's not supposed to have these feelings. He's having a lot of guilt about it, but that he's also like definitely falling in love with her. So this one is great. She has a lot of other books that are fabulous. So yes, definitely Sierra Simone. Then Katie Robert is another one that I absolutely love when it comes to steam and reading about steam in books. Katie Robert probably is one of the best authors when it comes to writing steamy scenes, mostly because I just feel like she's very creative with it, but then she also makes it very realistic. I think I follow her on Instagram and Facebook, and I believe she at one point she's talked about like how she comes up with her steamy scenes, and she says that sometimes if she's trying to figure out like coordination between characters, especially if she's writing steamy scenes with more than two people in the scene, it can be kind of bogged down with like whose hand is where and whose foot, like just the logistics of it. So the way that she writes it, like it makes sense, and you're not kind of like questioning like how this person got to this area like so quickly, or how they're able to like stretch that way, if you know what I mean. So a couple of her great series from her is going to be the Wicked Villain series, but and so the first one being Desperate Measures. So this whole series is Disney villain retellings, but making it steamy. So this first one is about Jasmine and Jafar. This one is really great. And then she also just in general has a Touch of Taboo series, which these are little like novella length stories that are all very, very, very steamy. Pretty well, like not a ton of plot. There is still a little bit of plot in these, but it isn't like the main focus of the story. So this one is Your Dad Will Do, about a girl who is pissed off at her ex-fiance, and she decides to get revenge by sleeping with his dad. So there's this one. Another author that I love reading for this theme, but then also like in general the storylines, is going to be Kristina Halley. She writes a very wide range of books. Like she writes contemporary, she's written paranormal, she's written like more kind of like thriller horror, I guess. The only book that I have by her is from the, what is this royal series that she wrote. I don't remember what this royal series is called, but the first one being The Swedish Prince. These are all, this whole series is about just these Nordic royalty So this has a lot of steam to it. And I also love, she has a standalone called Smut, which I'll put a picture up right here. And I love this one because it is basically pure smut, but it is about these two characters who are in college, and they're in, I believe it's a creative writing class, and they are enemies. They don't get along together, but they're supposed to write a story together, and they decide to write like a smutty, steamy kind of story and realize that they're really great at it. And so they decide to write smut together and sell it. And in the meantime, doing this, writing smut together, is making them very attracted towards each other. So this story is really good and very steamy, and I love it. So you should check out some Kristina Halley books. Another author that I love to read for this steam, and again, good plot, is going to be Nikki Sloan. For the most part, she tends to write really steamy stories. Now, she did have there's this one series, and I can't remember the name of it now off the top of my head. But it's got like covers with like women in these like really nice dresses. I don't know, I read that one and I was kind of disappointed with the steam on it, but all the rest of her books that I've read have definitely brought the steam. So one of them being her Blindfold Club series. So I have this one, which is the third book in the series, this is actually the only physical copy that I have of the series. I plan on getting more. But this Blindfold Club series is basically a sex club where men can come in and they can choose a woman to be with, and they can bid on the women, but the women are blindfolded, and the women are the ones that get to say yes or no, like to make the sale to be with whatever guy like tries to bid on them. This whole series is very, very steamy. Every single book is technically a standalone, and technically they're all male-female storylines, like love stories, but each book in this series does have group sex scenes in them. So if you like that, you should check this one out. And then she also has the Nashville Neighborhood series. So the first one being The Doctor. This whole series is very steamy, and I've loved every single book that I've read in this so far, although I've only read the first two. So this one is an age gap story of a girl breaks up with her boyfriend, but then falls in love and starts a relationship with her ex-boyfriend's dad. Like I said, very steamy, and this is great. The next author that I have to mention is going to be Tessa Bailey. I'm putting her on this list because mostly because of the first book that I ever read from her, which is going to be Fix Her Up. I put this on here because she is more of a traditionally published author, and I was blown away with how much steam is in this book, and I loved it because I feel like that's part of why I usually tend to read more indie published authors, because they can get away with a lot more steam and a lot more creativity in their books than more traditionally published authors. But this one is super good. This one is a brother's best friend kind of romance. Does have an age gap to it, and like I said, the steam on this was just perfect. And for the most part, lots of other Tessa Bailey books, most of the other Tessa Bailey books that I've read have brought the same level of steam, which I thoroughly enjoy. Then one of two historical romance authors that I have to mention on this list, the first one being Tessa Dare. So like I said, Tessa Dare is a historical romance author. This is the first book that I ever read from her, and again, kind of like with Tessa Bailey, I was very much blown away with the amount of steam that was in this romance. And again, that's also part of why I tend to not read, at least before I read this one, I hadn't read any kind of historical romance, and I wasn't as interested in reading historical romance, which now I've read a lot more. But I do still tend to prefer like Tessa Dare, just because there is a lot more steam in her romances than a lot of other historical romance authors. So this one is about a girl, and she had made a wedding dress for our hero from the story and his soon-to-be betrothed, but then they end up breaking up the engagement, but then she is still wanting to get paid for all the work that she did with making this wedding dress. So she puts it on and shows up at his house and is like demanding that she get paid, and he is still needing to get married so that he can have like an heir. So he's like, hey, you know what, why don't we get married, because you're here in a wedding dress. So, and this definitely has the whole like bodice ripper scene in it, and I was totally here for it. I loved it. Another indie author that tends to bring this theme is going to be C.M. Stunich. I read a ton of books from her. One of my favorite series from her is going to be the Groupie series, the Rock Hard Beautiful series. So Groupie is #1 in this series. This is a rock star romance about this girl, and she ends up getting involved with all the members of this rock band. This one is probably one of her steamiest series that I've read. Her books tend to vary on steam. For the most part, they're all going to be pretty high steam, but then she does have some that are more like new adult kind of books, and the steam on them is much more like around medium level kind of steam. And then she does have some series where like the first book doesn't have any steam to it and you have to kind of build up to it throughout the series. But this one brings the steam right from the get-go. There's lots of group activities throughout the series. I don't know if I can't remember if there's any group activities in this first book, but later on in the series there's definitely lots of group activities. And she has a lot of other good books too that again bring the steam with a lot of good plot to it. Then we have Pam Godwin, another all-time favorite author of mine. She definitely has a lot of steam to her books. She tends to write a lot of like BDSM type story, at least all the books that I've read from her. For the most part, they've had BDSM involved in some capacity. So one of my all-time favorite books ever by Pam Godwin is going to be Dark Notes. This is an age gap teacher-student story. And this kind of uses BDSM as a form of healing because our heroine of the story has had a lot of abuse in her past. And it's a way to kind of connect our characters together too. And then she does also, just kind of forewarning, if you want to get into some Pam Godwin books, her stories also tend to be on the much darker side. So if you're not into dark romance, you may want to stay away from her books, but I really love dark romance. So Dark Notes is definitely pretty dark. It does go into some more graphic details about her abuse that she has endured. Another really dark series, but also brings ton of steam to it, is going to be her Deliver series. So I have all of the books in these anthology, like I think anthology, I don't know, where like they're 3 books in one. So Deliver Us has the first 3 books, Deliver being the first book of the series. These are probably one of like the darkest stories I have ever read. So like I said, if you're not a fan of dark romance, you may want to stay away from these. So the first one is about a girl, and she is a sex trafficker, and she picks up this, I believe he's a college football player, picks him up and keeps him basically as a slave in an attic. And yeah, there's a lot more depth that's going on into it. But again, all of these stories pretty well involve BDSM in some capacity. These have probably like some of the most filthy sex scenes in any of the books that I've ever read, but I know it's not going to be for everyone just because of how dark these stories are. Then the second historical romance author that I have on this list is going to be Victoria Vale. She is a new to me kind of author. I've only read a couple stories from her, but the stories that I have read have definitely brought the steam. These are more like erotic historical romances that she writes. So Masquerade, which I'll put a picture up, this first book that I read from her, this is about a girl who is coming out into society. She's supposed to get married. She is having her season, but none of the men that she's meeting interest her. She sees herself being more like friends with them, but she really wants to get married to somebody that she loves, more specifically somebody that she can have a lot of passion with. That is definitely something that she is wanting. She just wants passion in her relationship. She wants to have steamy sex and love it. So she ends up going to this risque masquerade party, and she meets a man also in a mask, and they have a very steamy encounter together, and it was great, and I loved it. Then we have Catherine Moon. She tends to write more reverse harem stories. I don't know if she has a single book that is not a reverse harem. One of my favorites is going to be the Sweet Omegaverse series that she has co-written with Lana Cole, I think is the author, but I specifically really love the books that Catherine Moon has put into this series. So Baby and the Late Night Howlers is the first book of the series. These are Omegaverse stories, but they are really good like intro to Omegaverse. And again, we have a reverse harem, Baby, and she's getting with a pack of alphas and betas, and it's really great. And then the last steamy author that I have to mention is going to be Gina Darling. Gina Darling has basically two like series. She has the Fallen Men series, and then she has this other like these other series that are all tied together that are about these siblings. So each like series is about a different sibling. And then she has this other like standalone kind of series that I believe it doesn't connect to anything else. So my favorite is the Fallen Men series. So I have Welcome to the Dark Side, which is not the first book of the series, but it was the one that I had most readily available like in my book stacks. This definitely brings the steam. This is about the Fallen Men, which is an MC motorcycle club and just different members of the motorcycle club and them finding love. Very, very steamy. This book specifically, one of my all-time favorite stories, has some very steamy scenes. There is a scene at I believe it's a basketball game at a high school, and our two characters get it on behind the bleachers. There's also a scene involving a cherry lollipop. So definitely check her out if you want some steam and some really good plot to your stories. Very, very good romance stories. So there we go. There is my list of very steamy authors. If you're wanting to check out some books that have a lot of steam to them, these are pretty good go-to authors to check out. For the most part, their books tend to be pretty high in steam, and I thoroughly enjoy all of these authors. But yeah, if you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. I really appreciate it. And again, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you like my content and want to see more videos from me, I really appreciate it. But otherwise, I will see you on the next one. Bye guys.